So this Songs of Adaptation project we view as kind of a framework. We partner with local stakeholders and have globally consistent data standards and data analysis methodology, but then those it's very important that those be put in local context for local applications, and that the questions that we ask of the data are locally driven. Currently, we are working in the United States, mainly in the Chesapeake Bay, in Bolivia, in and near Madidi National Park, the highest biodiversity national park in the world, in Nepal, as I mentioned, in the Makalu National Park near Mount Everest, and in Uganda in riparian areas of the Nile River near Jinja. We have 22 monitoring stations, and some of these have been collecting data for over 2 years now. We are largely focused on bioacoustic data analysis, but we also are collecting other data. Temperature and relative humidity are very important. We have 15-minute time series of these variables, and you can see here at 3 different elevations in the Barun Valley, the elevation changes over about a year. We also have some camera traps put out, particularly in Nepal, where we've gotten photos of some very exciting species, including the red panda and the Himalayan monal. We also have vegetation surveys around each of the sites where we collect data, community surveys, avian field surveys, and some GIS data. So to talk more about the bioacoustics piece, if we want to understand biodiversity in a changing world through bioacoustics, what do we need to do? And why bioacoustics? So very remote regions are a challenge for monitoring, but acoustic monitoring can monitor large areas day and night, year-round, and then look at the seasonal and migratory changes, what birds are singing when and what locations. And why birds also. So they're well studied. They can also be very sensitive to environmental changes, and their ability to fly enables them to respond quickly to climate and anthropogenic change. Also, they have high vocal activity, so they're ideal for bioacoustic monitoring. So with this bioacoustic data, we want to develop a baseline data set to understand the timing, location, and abundance of species. And in the short term, we can identify species of interest for ecosystem protection. But in the long term, we would like to be able to determine how these species are responding to climate change, both spatial and temporal changes. So this is big data. Each of these recorders can collect about 1 terabyte of data per year. And for example, in 1 month in a forested site in Maryland, we collected over 250,000 sounds from birds, amphibians, and insects. We have about 50,000 hours of bioacoustic data stored and collected at this point, and we're developing cloud-based methods for storage and analysis because this is very big to deal with on a single computer. So far we have Earth Hertz, which is a streaming interface which allows partners to listen to the data. You can get on there and listen if you'd like, and also to label the data. So if someone listening knows what that species is, they can label that species right there in the streaming interface. So there's no need to download these large data sets. And we're developing artificial intelligence and machine learning tools to analyze the data and identify specific species. We're actually using image recognition tools, which I'll get into a little bit later, and we can process thousands of hours of data in minutes. So our bioacoustic data process is to collect the data. For every second that passes, we're recording 5 seconds of data. Then listening to the data. So this shows a spectrogram of the data. So we listen and look at the data. Not all of it, because that would be overwhelming, but bits of the data. And on the x-axis, you can see time, and on the y-axis, frequency, and then intensity. So with the help of local experts, we've identified over 50 species of birds in Nepal and in Bolivia. After that, we cluster the data. We use the computer to cluster the data into similar looking data, similar looking spectrograms. And this saves time. Then we have a cluster of the screaming piha. We have a cluster of these different birds, so we don't have to look at all of it. And then those clusters are verified by local experts. And that's the labeling process. So we want to label species which are of interest to us, like the yellow-vented warbler, the rufous-throated wren babbler, and the screaming piha. But we also want to label things that we're not trying to identify, such as some insects, rain, human activity, things like that. So we need both these positive and negative labeled data sets for the machine learning. And then we train the machine learning model. So we give it a bunch of labeled samples that we know this is the species we're looking for, and this is other things. And it trains the model to look for that species. So some of the technical details, we're using TensorFlow, which is an open source machine learning library. It's largely used for image recognition. Convolutional neural network, which takes these hundreds of images as training data. And those images are the MEL spectrograms of the audio clips. We utilize Microsoft's cloud-based services for running the data. We have Azure Data Lake for our storage, um, Azure Data Science virtual machines with Jupyter Notebooks and Databricks to split the data processing across multiple virtual machines so that the model can run more quickly. These machine learning models identify the probability of occurrence of a species in these terabytes of data. So when and where is that species present? And then these results can inform management decisions and address the needs of local